Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, I call him the Attitude from Bearing Arms, but fresh back from his date with Shania Twain. I don't know if he's told his wife about that yet, but it's early, so the date couldn't have went that well. Joining us, Tom Knighton. Thanks for coming along for the ride, man.
I appreciate having me.
Let's go ahead and get started. As we do, I want to remind everybody I'm getting social media hooked up here. As we get started, I want to remind everybody if you want to comment on the show, comment on either the Live Polite Society podcast, Facebook, or YouTube feed, or if you're catching us anywhere else, comment on that by going to Twitter and using the hashtag #TheBullet. Change that this week. I think that's a lot easier to remember than the old one I was using. But just tweet on Twitter with the hashtag #TheBullet. That will get right through to us, and we'll get your comment up on the air as long as it's somewhat relevant to what we're discussing. Speaking of discussing, the first story, this guy Tom Knighton writes some pretty good stuff. I want to talk about a story that hit today. About there was a shooting over the weekend at Coney Island. Two things about this one. What you pointed out in your article, one man dead, 4 other people injured after a shooting on Coney Island Boardwalk late Saturday night. NYPD says the shooting took place before midnight at Boardwalk and West 29th at Coney Island Beach. Police sources told Fox 5 New York there may have been multiple shooters. You point out it's pretty clear that gun laws just aren't working because Coney Island is the gun control central of New York City, which is gun control central of New York, which is kind of gun control central of the United States.
Yep.
And
even after Bruin, they they immediately rushed through all kinds of regulations, basically making it extremely difficult for a law-abiding citizen to carry a gun. And yet now at least one person carried a gun to Coney Island and shot 5 people, killing 1. Possibly 2 people were possibly 5 may be involved is all we have as of when I wrote the story. But 1 person, 2 people, however many, it's pretty clear they weren't lawfully carrying a firearm.
Right.
How is it gun control supposed to stop that? Right. I keep being told that gun control works. No way that could happen. It must have been killer hornets, murder hornets. That's what it was.
There you go. What burns me?
Murder hornets.
What burns me about this is the media is going to start screaming mass shooting. The FBI definition of
Violence Archive is going to call it that.
Yeah. FBI's definition of a mass shooting is 3 people dead, not including the shooter. And there's 1 dead, 3 injured here, not mentioning whether the shooter is the one deceased or not.
Right. And Gun Violence Archive is notorious for having changed that definition to where it's 3 or more people shot, and the media just picked that up and it's like, okay, well, we're going to accept it non-critically. You change the definition, and then you're like, well, there's been 300 mass shootings this year. No, there haven't. There haven't.
There absolutely have not been that many mass shootings. Mass shootings still remain incredibly rare, and I believe they're falling.
It's kind of difficult to tell with the way data, the time it takes to get actual usable data.
Mm-hmm.
But Gun Violence Archive takes that, and they're going to call this a mass shooting. It's going to count as a mass shooting. It's a big thing. It's not. It's a shooting. It's probably gang related. Either the victims were involved or had tangentially related to a gang, or they pissed somebody off that was in a gang, they were targeted, or someone else was targeted and they got caught in the crossfire.
Yep.
Your average gangbanger is not known for their mark.
Well, that there was a shooting.
At the end of the day,
there was a shooting in I want to say it was in the where it was in California. I'm trying to remember what city it was in. I want to say it was in the Sacramento area of California, where there was on-scene video of it where one of the bad guys was using a full auto Glock.
Yeah,
and this has been several months ago. And
that was Sacramento when that happened.
Okay,
and it was a huge mass shooting.
Yeah,
it was a gang fight that had collateral damage.
That was exactly it, and that made it. I mean, there were only I think only 2 people died in that one. That one made it to the gun violence archive, but there were hundreds of rounds shot. Well, it doesn't take long in a full auto.
No,
and there weren't even that many people injured. So,
yeah, the thing is, by inflating the number of mass shootings, you can make it sound more horrible. Because when people hear mass shootings, they're thinking Parkland, Uvalde, Las Vegas, Columbine. They're thinking those types of incidents. They're not thinking a couple of gangbangers try to slug it out, can't shoot worth a damn, and some people get hit.
Yeah.
That and here's the thing, they're two very different categories of shooting anyways. The way you solve mass shootings is with a completely different set of tools than you would gang warfare.
Yes.
They're different animals, but they look at this one tool and really perpetrated by tools of gun control. Oh, well, if we take away the guns, none of this will happen. Yeah, Oklahoma City go down.
Yeah, exactly. And Oklahoma City, and I discussed this last week on the bullet briefly. For those of you who may not remember Oklahoma City from the 1990s, one guy killed dozens of people, took down a federal building with diesel fuel and ammonium nitrate fertilizer. No weapons involved.
Or let's look at Nice, France, where 80-something people were killed with a truck?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to enact truck control?
Yeah, well, remember back to the parade, over the Christmas parade up in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. It looks like we need to enact Ford escape control, because that's what that guy used, and he killed 6 or 7 people in that parade. So yeah, let's
right. You had in a U-Haul truck in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Around Halloween a few years back.
I want to go ahead and move on to another story. This is another one by this really good writer I know named Tom Knighton. The Home Secretary. He's a pretty good writer. In the United Kingdom, the Home Secretary said the continued use of guns in UK crimes is a major concern, as she pledged more cash to get weapons off the street in the wake of Liverpool shootings. On Friday, Priti Patel met police officers and visited the scene where Olivia Pratt Corbel, 9, was shot dead by a gunman who chased his intended victim into her home. Asked how concerned she is about the continued use of firearms in the UK's biggest cities, Ms. Patel replied, "This is a major concern." Tom, it was, I believe, and again, going back to I think this was the late 1980s, that the handgun ban bill went through in United Kingdom,
Mhm.
and they've been pretty much outlawed since then. You can still sometimes get shotguns and rifles, but handguns have been outlawed for a very long time in the UK, and yet they're
Well,
still getting them,
I,
and they're not getting them.
yeah, the
They're not driving them across the border.
mm, no, UK has every advantage in that regard. It's an island with limited points of entry. If it's a lot harder to smuggle something onto it than anywhere else. Really, because of the UK's gun control laws, the Home Secretary must have been. This must be another case of murder reform running amok, because gun control works, and there just can't be guns in the UK's major cities, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
you, the UK is
look,
absolutely the
criminals
picture
are going
of
to
it's
criminal.
never going to work.
Yeah, criminals are going to criminal, right? Bad people are going to do bad things, and so when you pass gun control, you're like, well, this will make it at least more difficult for the bad people. But the problem is gun control makes it harder for the good people to defend themselves, right? Laws against murder may stop good from murdering people, but that's different. We're that's a whole different ballgame. Murder is an wrong. Defending oneself in a ballgame, that's not murder. That's not. Most rational people agree you have a right to do. You do not have an obligation to just sit there and let someone kill you.
Right.
And gun control inhibits that. That's a prime example of what's happened in the UK. Uh, uh, you know, even if criminals can't get guns, and that's they're still able to commit crimes. And they have a really interesting cottage industry there in Europe, where they take non-functioning replicas, machine out them out to make them functional firearms. The non-functional guns are perfectly legal. They basically drill out the barrel. They do whatever. I don't know what all they need to do to make it a functional gun. But they turn these non-functional replicas into functional firearms, smuggle them into places like the UK. You know, with that level of ingenuity, just how are you going to stop bad people getting guns?
Well, and now
I
that
wouldn't have looked at a non-functioning gun and go,
and
and
now
that was
that
before 3D printers were so obvious.
yeah, that's exactly where I was going. 3D printing, and even things like home milling machines, because 3D printing is
Mhm.
cool, and 3D printed guns are getting to the point where they're pretty reliable. But home milling machines are coming down in price, and once you get a milled billet, yeah, Katie, bar the door, man. That thing
Yeah,
is going to be as reliable as anything you and I could go down to the gun store and buy right now.
yeah. Well, remember, P.A. Ludi built a submachine gun using stuff he got from the hardware store.
Yeah.
You, how can anyone be so insane as to look at that and go, "Yeah, but that's not going to happen here"?
People are people are people. If it can be done, it will be done. Uh, let
Yep.
me let me get some
And
comments
some
up
people are
here.
going to do it out of spite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, Gun websites on the YouTube side says, in my opinion, we too casually discard criminal murderers with guns as gang shootings. Do we call cartel battles gang crime? They are much larger in scale than any street gang. Well, you do have a point there, Pete. There is a point to be made there. However, that
Mhm.
scale is very big. That's a huge jump in scale. And Tom, I don't know about you, but I don't see right now a whole lot of problem with cartel violence more than 5 miles away from the Mexico border in the United States.
Generally not, and I don't think anyone's discarding criminal murders with guns as gang shootings. We're just classifying them because there are significant differences between an abusive husband shooting his wife and your local Bloods and Crips going at it. The idea that all criminal use of guns are somehow similar simply because of the tool used is to me a fundamental problem with how we talk about so-called gun crime. It's not. Gun is an adjective in the term
Yes.
gun crime. Okay, it describes a certain type of crime, but the problem is there's not just one type of gun crime. You look at drug offenses. There are strong similarities. You're dealing with of addiction. You're dealing with organized criminal activities. There's a lot of uniform things that make it the same. With, say, prostitution, for example, it even though why someone pursues a quote unquote career as a prostitute, it's still ultimately the same criminal offense. Everything's there's in there that they belong to. They should be gathered. Homicides that involves or armed robberies or whatever else. There's enough, especially with homicides, though. There's enough of a difference in the underlying incident beyond an A shot person B that solving that issue becomes important to understand this differentiation. So when I talk about something being gang shooting, it's not that, it's not a big deal, it's just a gang shooting. Well, no, gang shootings are a big deal because as gang members are not known for their marksmanship. If gang members were literally just bumping each other off,
right, there's a lot of collateral damage in a gang shooting.
Yeah, if the gangs were just killing other back and forth, I would look at it as a trash taking itself out. That's not what happens. Gang members shoot up entire neighborhoods, because of whatever reason. Somebody looked at someone else wrong or whatever. I mean, idiotic stuff. And so by giving it as a gang shooting, the underlying problem is the gang.
Yes.
I'm not dismissing it or discarding it or anything else. I'm simply identifying it because of the crime is different and should be resolved in a way that works best for that category.
I'm going to get one more comment. I got 2 comments more from Pete over at Gun Websites I want to get in. Then we're going to move on to our next story. But staying on this same story we were talking about, he says, well, my concern is how do we know what is or is not professional criminals versus kids being reckless? At one point, I don't believe it should matter if they're committing a crime. Let's put them in jail for the crime they commit and keep them there for their sentence. If they are committing a felony, keep them there. Yeah. Go, Tom.
Yeah. If they're kids being reckless and new to the gang lifestyle, then, you identify it after sentencing to get them out of that lifestyle before they, well, they've already ruined their life, but, work to get them out then. The professional criminal, I mean, let's be honest, to be perfectly honest, most true professional criminals are actually pretty rare. The recidivists who most people think of as a professional criminal, you lock them up and you leave them there.
Yeah.
But that's something you identify. We don't need to identify that. That's for the criminal justice to identify. You can talk about ways to deal with it, but the fact of the matter is the way you gang shootings is by undermining the gangs before there's a shooting.
Yes.
Once the trigger's pulled, I don't care if it's a kid being reckless. I don't care if it's the gang's best enforcer who's killed 40 people and he only just now got caught. It's irrelevant to me in a lot of ways. It's still relevant if he's that dangerous. I'm glad they got him. But I mean, it's from a legal standpoint, to be prosecuted for murder. They should be. There shouldn't be a differentiation at that point.
We're having a little bit of a problem with your connection, Tom. You're breaking up a little bit, but I still want to get a couple more comments in here. Moving on to the England story, gun websites again. He says England gets its gun the same way Chicago does, from Indiana. Well, I don't know about Indiana, but I think Chicago that London may be getting its guns from Germany, maybe getting its guns from Switzerland. I don't know that they're coming from Indianapolis, but some I'm sure are.
Well, I get what he's saying with that, because it is a dig. Chicago always blames Indiana for their problems, yet Indiana have the same problem. I actually think a lot of the guns in the UK and other Western European nations, this is just my own hypothesis, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out they come out of Russia.
Yeah.
Because I can see the Russians wanting to help destabilize Western democracies. They may not be the Soviet Union anymore, but they still don't like us very much. And I could see them funneling those guns in and providing support for those who do that. Maybe through mob or maybe through other enterprises. But I really would not be surprised to find out that those guns are actually coming from Russia.
And there are, at least the last time I heard, and now I am not a foreign relations expert. I'm certainly not an expert on Russia or Czechoslovakia or anywhere outside the United States, okay? But I've heard of Russian gangs, and I certainly wouldn't put it past... gangs like to make money. If there's money to be made by moving guns into England, they're going to move guns into England. Who cares what the law is? If there's money to be made moving cocaine into England, they're going to move cocaine into England. Who cares what the laws are?
Yeah. If you've got a government that's willing to not just look the other way, but possibly help facilitate that enterprise, so much the better.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, one more comment here, and then we're going to move on to our next story. George says, and this is so true, Democrats, we have a gun problem with guns in Chicago, so we're going to have to take away Paul and Tom's guns. Yes, because there's that iron pipeline that runs from southern Georgia right straight up to Chicago.
Yep. And they legitimately expect us to give up our guns for their benefit.
Yeah, well, they can keep expecting.
Not going to happen.
Exactly. Next story I want to talk to you about, Tom. I understand you actually wrote this up for the VIP section of Bearing Arms, but a story hit for me today.
Yes.
University of Wisconsin recently promoted a new study contending that in U.S. counties where black people were enslaved in 1860, gun ownership is higher today. In fact, gun ownership, they say, is correlated to the number of slaves formerly in each county. To support this, more slaves means more guns theory. The authors construct a historical narrative that whites feared newly freed slaves bought guns for self-defense, and this fear somehow trickled down over 160 years. What they don't take into account is that these counties are heavily populated with black minorities, and black minorities are buying guns in huge, huge numbers. It couldn't be that their pet minority there could be going away from their ideal.
Yeah. Well, there's even a more simple explanation than that. there were a large number of slaves in rural counties where agriculture was a big thing. There's long been a connection between rural populations and gun ownership, things like hunting. If you have crops, a lot of farmers here are going to have rifles because wild hogs will tear up your fields. You have to deal with various pests that may damage your crops. And then there's the fact that if you've got 3 sheriff deputies in the entire county and they're on the other side of town when someone tries to break in your house, you've got to protect yourself.
Yes.
It was 160 years ago, for crying out loud. What does something 100 years ago have anything to do with what's going on in the rural South today? I hate to break it to you, things change over more than a century and a half.
Yes. Absolutely they do.
Although and then there's a proxy. Remember, they didn't actually carry permits, gun sale data, anything. They looked at gun suicide data. That was their proxy. In a rural county, one suicide carries a lot more impact than one suicide in a city because the population's lower.
Yeah.
So even that isn't even proxy. And truth be told, the whole reason behind this study, because anyone who looked at the facts, well, slavery was pretty good in rural counties. Rural counties are known to have a lot of guns. Ooh, we can make correlation and make gun owners look more racist. It's the only reason to conduct the study. There is no useful data that comes out of this. Nothing. All this is about developing propaganda.
And let's face it, the university system that this comes out of is not exactly centrist or right-leaning.
Oh no. This is a hard left university system. Even in comparison to university systems. Right? You put them on a regular political, oh yeah, they're going to be way left. But if you put them on a spectrum of public universities, they're still going to be far left.
Mm-hmm.
Even on that spectrum, they're way to the left. So, I mean, and someone looked at this and said, oh yeah, this is a valid topic of study. Without ever considering the fact that this doesn't actually help the debate. This doesn't help anything, and it's not even useful information. What? More people in the South have guns. Once upon a time, there was a steep sin here in the South called slavery. Yes, it was there. It was awful. Even if not every slave was treated like the worst, parts of Uncle Tom's Cabin, it was still an awful institution because you could not own other people. The fact that these black people were not able to make decisions for themselves across the board was a horrible travesty. It doesn't change the fact that it was 160 years ago.
Yeah. No one alive today has even grandparents that were alive then. So,
I know one person could probably say that. His dad was a Civil War veteran. His kids can say that.
Okay.
But at the time, this was, in the late 80s, early 90s, and there were like 2 sons of Civil War veterans alive.
Yeah.
Freakish situations. But yeah, today almost nobody experienced it.
All right, let me get a couple more comments.
I'm
gonna get a couple more comments in quick. We're gonna run late, but I cannot run very late because I got to turn around and do Polite Society podcast. But I want to get a couple comments in here quick.
The joys of Monday.
Telling you. Michael says from the Facebook side, back in the 1960s, even the NRA supported gun control to disarm the militant groups of California. I'm not aware of that. I don't. I'm not saying that's wrong. It could very well be right. I've never looked that up, so yeah, I cannot say
I don't
that's
know
true
about
or
the
not.
Black Panther. I don't know about the NRA supporting it, but considering the NRA of that era, they may have.
Yeah,
But there were some, the Republicans, a lot of Republicans in California did support gun control after the Black Panthers showed up with guns. It happened. That was 60 years ago. That was over half a century ago.
yeah.
I'm always amused. It's like, well, they did this 60 years ago. Okay. And pretty much none of us voting now were voting then.
You're right. One more comment, then I want to get to our last story because I've got to give this last story some airtime. We talked about it pre-show, and I've been itching to do it. But let me get this last comment in here. Pete over at Gun Websites again from the YouTube side. That data means more of everyone bought guns in an exercise of freedom. People hunt, shoot sports shooting scholarships. When barriers that limit rights are removed, people exercise their rights. 100% dead on, Pete. That when you can do something, when the government takes away barriers, people do whatever they want to do, and here's evidence of that.
Yep.
All right.
Badly.
Let's I want to get this last story in because I really want to give Ozzy Osbourne a load of something. Rock and roll star Ozzy Osbourne said he is fed up with gun violence in the United States and plans to permanently move back to the United Kingdom. The former Black Sabbath frontman said in an interview with The Guardian that he and his wife Sharon were making the move because everything is ridiculous in the U.S. The move is unrelated to the star's health, Miss Osbourne said. America has changed so drastically, it is not the United States of America at all. Nothing's united about it, she told the newspaper. Ozzy added, I'm fed up with people getting killed every day. God knows how many people have been shot in school shootings. I want to say this to Ozzy Osbourne. Enjoy the tax rates back in jolly old London, my friend. And, oh, by the way, how about you check out the violent crime rates in the United Kingdom and compare that to the violent crime rates in the United States? Get back to me about that.
Yeah. To Ozzy, I have to quote a movie. He's in the entertainment industry, different venue, but I have to quote a movie. Tombstone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, bye.
Bye, Felicia.
Oh wow. Yeah. Oh wow. A spoiled, a entertainer decides that he doesn't like the way things will leave. I don't care. I honestly don't care if he goes back to England. It does not affect me. But I will say that he's wrong about the number of children shot in school shootings. All right. When you break down the number of mass shootings since Columbine, it work out to one per day on an average.
I knew
much less is happening every day.
I knew this was going to happen. We're getting a lot of comments. Let me get a couple of them in here. Michael says, "Good riddance. Hope they have many bats there." And followed that up with knife attacks. That is an issue in Britain. They have knife laws now, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And then Pete, good point. He's moving there. He didn't say his investments are going to Europe also. Yeah.
Fair point.
And finally, George. Ozzy who? Never heard of her.
Yeah, it's like I Here's the thing though. Who the hell expects intelligent discourse on American politics from Ozzy Osbourne? I have to understand what he's even saying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There is that. Well,
here's my Ozzy impression.
Sharon.
It was like watching the Osbourne family. I couldn't understand half of it. It was all Ozzy
subtitles on. Yeah.
To everybody else. I felt bad for the guys who had to write the subtitle. I don't know what the hell he's saying, man. I'm just making up some crap.
Or if they did, with the president's speech, they have to have the one person that does sign language, right? The person that does Biden's speech, I think, just sits there with this, does the loser thing the whole throughout the speech. Anyway,
they get the guy who did the Mandela funeral for Biden. Do you remember that? The guy didn't know sign language.
Just made it up as he went along.
That was amazing. Some deaf guy was like, I think he just told me to steal home.
We got to get out of here, man.
Yeah.
Tom, on the way out, let people know where people can catch your stuff and anything you want to promote today, bud.
Okay. Obviously you can find me at Bearing Arms over on Twitter at the Tom Knighton. Also got a Substack there. I talk generally non-gun politics. TomKnighton.substack.com. It's called Tilting at Windmills. Check it out. And other than that, that's all I got right now.
All right. On my end, I want to encourage everybody, do come back in about 25 minutes. Catch Polite Society podcast tonight. And, of course, the rest of the week, join me right here, same bat time, same bat channel, Ozzy, for The Bullet, 5 p.m. Central Time, every day this week. Thanks for watching, everybody. We will see